20,000 right-wing demonstrators went to the streets, and a lot of those right-wing demonstrators, they are what we would perhaps call some of the most radical. I mean, they were calling out for death to Arabs. So this is another tension that we have in our society. And we talked a few nights ago about a potential civil war. I don't know if we're at that place yet, but we have a lot of internal conflicts. Bibi has our security at heart. We also talked about him firing the defense minister. Well, the last couple of days there's been talk that perhaps he will reinstate that defense minister, and it does not look like he will do that. I don't know what the talks were that he had with him. Some of the news articles were saying that Bibi was asking for a public apology, and there has not been any. But the headline is that he's waiting to appoint a new defense minister. And, you know, one of the big questions that's going on right now in our country is, you know, especially when we reflect on what was going on in the days of the Bible with the divided kingdom. A lot of rabbis are talking about that period. And not that it was a civil war, but it was a divided kingdom. The 10 northern tribes of Israel, the 2 southern tribes, the kingdom of Judah, and the conflicts. And what's interesting, one of the big topics being raised is the difference between a Jewish state and an Israeli state. Because a lot of our left-wingers, they call themselves Israeli because they have Israeli citizenship. They are Jews, but what kind of Jews are they? And a lot of them are secular. A lot of them are not interested in the laws of Moses. And see, going back to the other side of the tug of war, you know, you've got a lot of these right-wingers in our government. This is why, Brandon, and our viewers need to know, another one of the big reasons why why so many people are against a lot of these judicial legislations. It's not that they're against the judicial legislation. They actually want it. The polls say 80% of the population, including the left, want judicial reform. Here's the problem. The left see where the right wing are going. And don't forget, this is the most right-wing religious government we've ever had. And some of those right-wing politicians, they want to bring in and legislate certain laws going back to the laws of Moses. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here in Israel, along the Mediterranean coast, where we have beautiful beaches, there are some areas where they will have segregated beaches, meaning certain hours of the day, they will have men only and women only because of their modesty laws. There are some politicians, right-wing religious, you know what they want to do? They want to make all the beaches 24/7, 364 days of the year, segregated beaches. This is one example of some of the radical laws that they want to bring in. Of course, they want to throw out all the LGBT protests, marches. They want to throw out the LGBT agenda through the education
But of
system.
course, we here in America, a lot of us here in America, we'd be for that part of it, right? We'd be for throwing all that out. I mean, I mean, I think was it over in what country did I just report where they're throwing all that out? It was an African country. I mean, they're throwing it all out. I mean, you're going to be in big trouble if you start promoting the LGBTQ agenda to any young person over there in their country. I can't remember which country it was, but you know, I have no problem with him throwing the LGBTQ agenda out of the schools in Israel. I guess if that makes you a far right guy, then I'd be pretty comfortable. I mean, pretty much at home with some of the folks in Israel. I mean, I'm sure some of their other stuff could be a little extreme because I'm not interested in going back to the Mosaic law in the sense of the civic and ceremonial laws of Israel. I'm not interested in that. I'm not going back to slaughtering animals for sacrifice. I mean, we don't need that. Christ was the one and final lamb and sacrifice for all those who place their faith and trust in Him and His death, burial, and resurrection. You and I agree on that. So I don't agree with you. I mean, I'm not saying I'm for stoning certain people caught in adultery, other things, as the Old Testament. So are you trying to tell me they want to go back to all those kind of things?
So there are some, definitely, 100%, there are some members, that's their agenda. Just like the Muslims, they want to go to a caliphate, they want to go to Sharia law. The right-wing extreme Orthodox Jews, of course, they don't believe in our democracy, and there's a lot in our democracy.
So they want a theocracy.
Absolutely, for sure, no question about it. They believe that it's part of the ushering in of the Messiah. And of course, with that goes the rebuilding of the temple and sacrifices. And by the way, it's now been declared, we talked about this a few months ago when the 5 red heifers arrived in Israel, that they will be sacrificed
by this fall.
I'm sorry?
By this fall, right?
No, it's gonna be, they're talking about it being in about a year's time. We're coming up next week to Passover. We're talking about next Passover. That's when they are talking.
Okay. See, I thought it was gonna be as quick as maybe by this fall they could start doing. So you're saying a year from now?
About a year from now.
Now, this is very good. We have these conversations because it helps a lot of us to understand. Because we think through the lens of the words in America. Someone who's far right, opposed to the LGBTQ agenda. Something we're like, yeah, well, what's wrong with that? That's you're describing a lot of us here in America there. But what you describe as far right in Israel is not what we would describe far right in America, because the far right in America aren't interested in building a temple, going to a sacrifice, having a theocracy. They're not for the Mosaic law or the civic and ceremonial laws of Israel. I mean, that means, really, frankly, they'd be interested in going back to the tithe, right? I mean, you're going to have a way to feed and care for the Levites who are running the temple and the sacrifices. So I guess you're going to go back to the first, second, and third tithe, which, of course, the Christians in America be completely confused by that because they've been brainwashed by their pastors to think they got to cough up 10% of their income to the church as a tithe, but the average American doesn't realize their pastor has been cheating them and lying to them, either deliberately or out of their ignorance, because the tithe in the Old Testament was not money. In fact, if you live too far from the temple, they would say, take your tithe, turn it into money, travel to the temple, and then when you get there, take your money, turn it back into tithe, and buy whatever your heart desires: oil, wine, meat, etc. The tithe was fruit, meat, grain, oil. So the whole tithe concept in America is not in the Bible. It's in the New Testament. Give cheerfully, for God loves a cheerful giver. It was literally part of their civic and ceremonial law, their theocratic tax to run the nation, to run the government, to run the various religious institutions, the temple, or working with the priest within the confines of their community, far from the main temple. Our Americans don't understand what I'm saying, but if you go and follow this specific law that you're talking about now, you're telling me this is what the far right wants to go to, which means eventually when they get the temple, they're going to have to go back to some of these things like the tithe, right?
I'm glad to hear that what you just came out with is absolutely accurate, and that is exactly what their agenda is. Of course, they know it's going to take time, it's going to be slow, but where there is a will, there is a way. And, there are different streams of Orthodox Judaism. There are ultra-Orthodox, there's National Orthodox. There's so many different streams. But there's a definite push to this agenda. And again, going back to that tug of war push, Bibi Netanyahu is in a very tough predicament because he's got to keep every party happy.
Or his coalition falls apart and he's no longer prime minister.
Exactly. And I said this when he was voted. I said, we're going to see a very different Bibi because they're going to hold him ransom. The right wingers are going to hold him ransom. And so it'll be interesting to see in the future, as we're seeing now, how much leeway he gives them, how much he has to go along with them. But he's being pulled in so many different directions, and even with the freeze in the judicial reforms, he made a freeze the other night. Number of people in his party are against it, but the majority actually agree with him because, as I quoted the other night, Bibi said, I am not going to lead our nation into a civil war. Now, since the freeze, the left are still going out on the streets, the right are still going out on the street. The left still don't trust Bibi. They say he's just stalling for time until the summer. But in the meantime, he's sitting down, he's discussing with the left potential reforms, which is a good thing. This is a good sign to our nation that we're sitting. In fact, Bibi has asked, as well as other members of our right wing party, they've asked Benny Gantz from the left to actually join the coalition. And this could be that if Bibi gets more members in his government, especially from the left, that he won't be so held to ransom by his right wing religious. So there's a lot of playing going on here, but like I said, it's like a tug of war. He's being pulled in so many different directions. The Arabs, for the most part, they have been out of this debate between judicial forms, the left and the right. They're keeping pretty quiet with that, but they have their own agendas. But where things have calmed down for now, but there's a lot of tension still in our nation.